GoForThe2.com in with the Week 8 college football predictions. Let's jump right into it. Classic Big Ten battle. It's Iowa and Northwestern. Iowa's won 3 of the last 5 by 26 points per game, but Northwestern did pick up this ball game last year, 38-31 in Iowa City. They were able to challenge Iowa's secondary vertically, and I think that's the matchup you have to watch play out this coming Saturday. You look at Northwestern overall, they rushed last week in the victory against Maryland for 238 yards on the ground, but more importantly, this offense is averaging 267 passing yards per game. Clayton Thorson, their quarterback's completing 60% of his passes, 1,496 yards, 8 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. I think they could challenge Iowa's defense vertically in this ball game from an offensive perspective. And you look at Northwestern's defense over the last 4 games now against Bowling Green, Wisconsin, Penn State, and Maryland. Front 7 has played very well in run support, holding opposing offenses to 96.2 rushing yards per game. Think they could force Nathan Stanley and Iowa's offense into third down and long situations. I like Northwestern's defense in this matchup. They're playing at home. I think they get a convincing double-digit victory, anywhere from 10 to 17 points over Iowa this coming Saturday. Iowa's coming out of a bye week, but I don't think it matters. You could expect a little offensive inconsistency from Iowa as well coming out of a bye week. Sometimes there's quarterback to wide receiver relationship timing issues. Offensive line sometimes coming out of a bye week has inconsistencies or lack of cohesion. That could factor into this ball game as well, going up against a solid defensive front 7, in my opinion, over the last 4 games in Northwestern. Look for Northwestern to pick up a convincing double-digit victory in Ryan Field this weekend over Iowa. Another ACC battle is Pittsburgh on the road against Duke. Duke has lost 3 straight now to Virginia, Florida State, and Miami. The last 2 games to Virginia and Florida State. Duke has lost both of those games by 7 points apiece. They lost last week to Florida State 17-10 and allowed 228 rushing yards on the ground. But you look at Pittsburgh this year. They started against Youngstown State. That was a quality FCS opponent. Since that time, they've played Penn State, Oklahoma State, Georgia Tech, Syracuse, NC State. Those teams are a combined 24-7 overall. So they really got beat up by solid competition. They did beat Rice, that they matched up very well against. I look for Pittsburgh to be in this ballgame from start to finish. They played NC State very well from a defensive perspective. They held Brian Finley and that offense in check from a secondary perspective, only allowing 198 passing yards per game. Ben DiNucci, their quarterback, did complete over 55% of his passes. This is a team that's still playing hard each and every week, and I'm not sold on the mindset of Duke entering this ballgame after 2 tough losses. I look for Pat Narduzzi's crew to get the upset on the road this coming Saturday. Anywhere, I think it's a low-scoring game. I think it's a 27-20 Pittsburgh win this coming weekend. I just think Pittsburgh matches up very well, offense and defensive lines going up against Duke. Where's Duke's mindset entering this ballgame? Look for Pittsburgh to get the road victory this coming Saturday. Another intriguing battle is Utah and Arizona State. Utah, since 2012, is 2-0 over Arizona State and has won those games by 19.5 points per game. Utah coming off a disappointing 28-27 loss to USC last week. They went for 2 on the road, did not get it. They had a 21-7 halftime lead and let that lead slip to the Trojans and Sam Darnold. They now come back home to face a red-hot Arizona State team that knocked off Washington last week 13-7. They held Washington to 3 of 14 on third down conversions. That was 21%. You look at Utah's offense entering this ballgame, they're only converting 33% of their third down conversions. Over the last 3 games now, a one-dimensional offense. They're only averaging 131 rushing yards per game and only completing 55% of their passes heading into this ballgame. You look at the defensive factor for Utah overall. Over the last 2 games, Utah does not have a sack. Over losses against Stanford and USC, they did not record a sack. They only have 11 total sacks entering this ballgame. And more importantly, in run support, over the last 3 games now, Utah's allowed 190 rushing yards per game. Compared to the first 3 games of the year, they only allowed 49 rushing yards per game. They're going up against a solid offense in Arizona State, but I really like the way Manny Wilkins is playing in the system. He's completing 66% of his passes, 1,697 yards, 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And you look at the defense for Arizona State over the last couple of weeks now, especially in the secondary. They're holding opposing offenses to 56% completion percentage and only 156 passing yards per game. Arizona State does have 20 total sacks entering this ballgame. I think Arizona State wins this ballgame. I think they're playing with confidence. I think that victory at home over Washington continues this coming weekend. And Utah, in my opinion, can be a worn-out football team. They've had a tough 3-game stretch now. They're playing another team that's a physical team in Arizona State, especially on the defensive front. They blitz a lot. That could put some pressure on Utah's offensive line. And I think that Arizona State does get the road win this coming Saturday. I think it's high scoring, 34-28. Arizona State gets the victory in Ross Eccles Stadium this coming Saturday. We'll stick in the Pac-12. It's another intriguing battle, Notre Dame and USC. It's a classic rivalry. You look at Sam Darnold on the year this year, 63% completion percentage, 2,064 yards, 15 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. This is a USC offense that's converting 46% on third downs and holding opposing offenses to 36% of their third down conversions. You look at USC overall from a front seven perspective. Entering this ballgame, USC has recorded 22 total sacks through 7 games. You look at Notre Dame's defense, they're giving up 231 passing yards to opposing offenses, but they haven't been challenged by an offense like USC with team speed. They played a team like Georgia, but Georgia's offense is only averaging 171 passing yards per game and does have an inexperienced quarterback when they played in Jacob Fromm. They played teams like Temple, Boston College, Michigan State, teams that didn't stretch them vertically, North Carolina. I think they get challenged this coming weekend. I think Sam Darnold and USC are able to stretch Notre Dame's defense vertically, and I'm not sold on the consistency of their quarterback, Brandon Wimbush. Look for USC to get a convincing double-digit victory this coming Saturday. I think it's high scoring, though, 40-30. USC picks up the road victory in South Bend and moves to 6-1 on the year. Another intriguing battle is UCLA and Oregon. Oregon's won the last 2 meetings by 20 points per game. Oregon, from an offensive perspective, is struggling since their quarterback Justin Herbert went down. Over the last 3 games, they're only averaging 103 passing yards per game. You look at the flip side, their secondary over the last 3 games now has struggled. They've allowed 10 touchdowns, 1 interception. They're going up against a high explosive offense in terms of a passing perspective in UCLA that's averaging 399 passing yards per game. Josh Rosen on the year has completed 64% of his passes, 2,364 yards, 17 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. To me, that's the difference. I think it's a shootout. UCLA is very weak in run support. They're allowing over 300 rushing yards per game, but I think their offense can challenge Oregon, get them into a shootout, and I'm not sold on the quarterback situation for the Ducks, especially in back-to-back road games. I look for UCLA to break out in this ballgame, and I think they win this ballgame by 20 points or more. I think UCLA is able to put up 50 spot on Oregon's defense this coming Saturday. Not sold on the consistency of Willie Taggart from an offensive perspective. Since Herbert went down, they're a one-dimensional offense, especially in third down conversions as well. Look for Josh Rosen to get healthy. I think UCLA puts up a 50 spot, 52-35. UCLA wins this ball game in the Rose Bowl. Another intriguing battle is a Big 12 clash, Texas Tech and Iowa State. Texas Tech coming off a disappointing road loss to West Virginia. They had a double-digit lead early in the second quarter. They allowed that game to slip to Will Grier and West Virginia. This is a team in Texas Tech now Since the last 3 years, 3.5 years, they are 10-20 in Big 12 play. They lost this game last year to Iowa State 66-10. This is an Iowa State team that is coming off a shutout victory at home against Kansas. This is an Iowa State team that's averaging 293 passing yards per game. Kyle Kemp, their quarterback, completing 70% of his passes, 496 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. But I look at Iowa State's defense overall. They're holding opposing offenses to 119 rushing yards per game. They're +6 in turnover margin, and they're very solid in terms of forcing teams to methodically work down the field. I think that's the difference in this ball game. They have playmakers at the running back position in David Montgomery that can be utilized in the short to intermediate passing game. Allen Lazard as well, and I think Matt Campbell is a solid head coach. He has this team sitting at 4-2 overall. Both teams are 4-2, but I just think Iowa State's headed in the right direction to becoming bowl eligible. It's a road game in Lubbock, never an easy place to play, but I like Iowa State from a physicality perspective. They get it done. Again, another high-scoring game, 38-31. Iowa State gets this victory on the road in Texas Tech, not sold on Cliff Kingsbury and the Red Raiders entering this ballgame. Another intriguing battle is an SEC class, LSU and Ole Miss. LSU has won 3 of the last 5 by 8.6 points per game, but they've lost the last 2 in Oxford by an average margin of defeat of 12 points per game. They're coming off 2 gutty wins 2 weeks ago against Florida, 17-16. They trailed 20-0 against Auburn and were able to score 27 27 unanswered points for the most part and win that ball game 27-23 over Auburn. I look at this offense led by Danny Etling that's completing 59% of his passes. He does have over 1,200 yards passing. This is an offense that's averaging 201 passing yards per game, and they're rushing for 191 rushing yards on the ground. I think they're able to wear down Ole Miss in this ballgame. Ole Miss and Shea Patterson is a one-dimensional offense, and more importantly, over the last 3 games now, from a defensive front 7, they're getting worn out in run support. Against Alabama, they allowed 365 yards. They allowed 326 to Auburn, and they allowed 188 in the victory to Vanderbilt, a dominating double-digit victory. They were able to stretch Vanderbilt's defense vertically. They will not be able to do that against LSU. Over the last 3 games, Ole Miss has allowed 293 rushing yards per game. I like the secondary of LSU going up against Shea Patterson in this ballgame. You look at LSU overall, they have 23 total sacks entering this matchup. They're only giving up 170 passing yards to opposing offenses. Very solid in run support, holding opposing offenses to 130 rushing yards on the ground. That was a dynamic second half effort by Dave Aranda. They have momentum. They have a bye week after this. Do not expect LSU to take this game lightly. They're sitting at 4-2 and face Alabama after the bye week. I think they get healthy. They run all over Ole Miss in this ballgame. Look for a convincing 17-point victory by LSU on the road. I think they're able to wear down Ole Miss in this ballgame. Look for Darius Geis and Darrell Williams to break out. LSU gets a convincing 17-point victory on the road in Oxford. Stay with me all season long. Follow the radio show every Saturday morning, 9 to 12 a.m., 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Time on Fantasy Sports Radio and Television Network, or Channel 262 Dish Network, or 6 to 9 Pacific in the morning. College football is great. I just love talking about it. Have a great weekend, everyone.